So, coming off of Genealogy the Holy War, which we're actually recording right after recording this section, came Thracia 776. Once a game I haven't played, but people who have played it are, once again, Jacob is returning. And also, someone new to all of this, Illialidur. You want to just introduce yourself?
When I hear people pronounce my name right, it's so exciting.
Alright, so you just want to tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what I can link in the comments?
For me?
Yeah, since they haven't seen you.
So I was laughing through your sentence.
Alright, cool.
Yeah, sure. Hey, my name's Illialidur. I am a podcaster, sort of. I play Heroes a lot, and I make content over that. It's called Theology. That's how Deku knows me. I also frequent a few different Fire Emblem communities, like Blazing Knights and Mechas. And I really love Fire Emblem. I've been playing it for most of my life, and I'm excited to help out here.
Alright, excellent. So I gotta work on homework, so you two have fun here without me.
Yeah. Oh, how can we have fun with you?
Okay, yeah.
We can roast him. He's gone.
We can roast him.
He's gone now, so it's fine.
Excellent. Deku is probably not the tastiest thing to roast. Probably sooner eat. Deku nuts probably aren't the best thing to roast.
I imagine. They tend to blow up on your face in Smash Bros.
So, anyways, yeah, that's Recipe for Disaster. Discussion is Thracia. So, Thracia kind of came out at a really, really awkward time in Fire Emblem development. I affectionately call this the Fire Emblem 64 sagas, and less affectionately call it that kind of time show that kind of went absolutely insane.
There's a lot of issues at Intelligent Systems during the development of Thracia, and it's something that we don't really know all the details about, but you can certainly see just how it affected development and execution of things in this game.
I've kind of pieced together my own conspiracy about what happened, but this is something that kind of bleeds into both FE5 and Binding Blade, so we'll probably go into more detail on the Binding Blade side of that later. Also bled into things...
Thank goodness I'm not going to be here for Binding Blade.
It probably bleeds into... I think as late as Radiant Dawn, you start to see you still see the effects of this, but generally was not pleasant time for most people working on FE5. Pressure was high to create a 3D tile in the Fire Emblem series after FE4, including pressure from Shigeru Miyamoto. Shozo Kaga pretty stubbornly refused to acquiesce to this, usually citing a general lack of faith in the N64 and 3D gaming in general as his reasoning. However, behind the scenes, FE64 did indeed start development and get far enough to have a fleshed out narrative and an undisclosed amount of character, as well as the title of Fire Emblem the Dark Priestess. We do actually have a localized title for FE64 by proxy of the epithet being localized as something else, but that's relevant to the Binding Blade video.
Somehow, if you don't know anything about Binding Blade and Dark Priestess, it kind of makes sense those are connected. Wasn't Nintendo 64, wasn't the main character supposed to be named Ike?
I believe so, but he was closer to Roy. Basically, it was Roy, but it was named Ike. And Roy himself went through 15 different design changes before Sakurai himself, yes, this is one of those weird development times, Sakurai, as in the Smash Bros. Guy, came in to help finalize Roy's design for Smash Bros. Melee.
He's like, I'm putting this guy in there, and if you don't know what he's going to look like, I'm going to tell you what he looks like.
Yeah, Masahiro Sakurai is actually in the credits of Binding Blade under Roy's character design, if I recall. I don't recall.
He really is.
I think it was something like character design assistant or something, but
yeah, I beat Binding Blade a couple weeks ago. Again, I was watching the ending credits, and I saw Sakurai, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, I know who that is. Mm-hmm. He's definitely not Fire Emblem, but he was for a little bit there.
Yeah, fun fact, Sakurai has actually gone on record to say his favorite Fire Emblem game ever is Genealogy of the Holy War.
Lad.
So
we still don't have Sigurd in Smash Bros. What is this?
Yeah, he's actually said this is a bit
why to put him in Smash 64.
He's actually said that Genealogy is his favorite game, but it took until Smash Ultimate to get rep first for Jug Droll. That is either some serious self-control or some serious executive meddling.
He didn't get a rep from Drug Draw.
Any rep at all, which is to say spirits and actual
Spirits.
proper
Okay, yeah, he definitely did get the Sigurd, Deirdre, Julius. I saw all those.
Yeah, and there was the ending of Gen 1 as a track in Ultimate.
Really? Well, that's nice. We all love the ending of Gen 1. That is...
Yeah, that's definitely Sakurai bias at work, because he said one of the scenes that majorly affected his outlook on game development was the ending of Gen 1. So the ending of Gen 1... That
is where men cried. That is where real big boy men cried. So
yeah,
that would definitely be angelic.
Anyway, in the meantime, all this with FE64 was going on. Smaller team within Intelligent Systems was working on a side project for the Super Famicom, a completely new cast of characters, which very quickly and suddenly became the primary project once it's clear FE64 was not going to happen, at least on the N64.
Not until the Game Boy Advanced, and with a character not named Ike.
And funny enough, Binding Blade is not the only game that originated on the N64 only to move to Game Boy Advance. There's two other examples, Golden Sun and Mother 3.
Love Golden Sun. Golden Sun, so good.
Yeah, well, this resulted in... Because they were working on a side project, which very suddenly became the main project, it resulted in a lot of sudden shifts in the project's direction, and staff wasn't really happy about this. But this can probably help to explain why Thracia's story is structured as it is. Apparently, the game originally had nothing to do with FE4's cast, at least directly. It's unclear if it was going to be on Jugdral or not with a new cast. But at some point, for whatever reason, Leif from FE4 was decided to be the main protagonist of the game at some point.
It was apparently during development, it shifted from being a different cast entirely to being somewhat based around a few characters from FE4.
Yeah, there's even in the final game, there's barely 8 characters from FE4 if we count Avil.
Yeah, if we count Avil. I would love to be able to answer that question of yours, but I can't. I don't have any. I have the spreadsheet pulled up of characters of both games.
Well, I guess
some of the replacement characters from Gen 2 show up in FE5.
No, they were going to, but they were cut.
Just as well. They didn't do anything good for FE4.
Some of the actual children appear in FE5, though. I know Corporal is one example, or however you want to look like his name.
Leaf and Nana, obviously. Leaf and Nana.
Yeah, and then there's Sed as a playable character. And Lewin makes... Do what?
Doesn't Selif show up at some point?
Yeah, Selif has a pretty prominent role as an NPC. Julia and Lewin appear for one cutscene.
As they should. Sed is there, of course.
And then there's Trevant and Altena for one cutscene. A lot of the stuff concerning FE4 characters in FE5 actually indicates that a lot of them were going to have a larger role than just NPCs. Biggest one is probably Julius, who has a fully programmed class and a Loptus tome that actually acts a little bit differently from FE4.
Goodness, because it was stupid in FE4.
Oh no, it's even worse in FE5. So
how? There is no one can use the Nagatome in FE5.
Yeah, basically it's the same effect, but I think it's a little bit more drastic, or I might be confusing it with something else.
Anyways, it could just be like the Arden and Super Thracia, who you're not supposed to be able to kill. Wait, that's a hack. So getting back to the FE5.
Yeah, we start to see, in the context of the series as a whole, a few inconsistencies in Thracia's story start to pop up whenever you compare it to Gaiden, Mystery of the Emblem, Genealogy of the Holy War. And particularly with Mystery of the Emblem, and I guess Genealogy, if you count the whole saga with Leif going into the Munster, but not really. And the whole thing with I'm trying to remember exactly what it was and how to phrase it, but basically it's the thing where he's in one point and Selif isn't, but in FE5 they were the same party. You know what I'm talking about.
Something I want to mention is that I know some YouTuber did a really good video about why a combined FE4 and FE5 remake wouldn't work, and he cited the story differences in FE4 and FE5 as a reason why. So if you're curious as to some of the ways that FE4 and FE5 differ from each other, I believe it was Chaz. I think Chaz did that video. It was pretty good. If you're curious about why FE5's story doesn't really fit as snugly as you might expect, that could be a cool thing to check out.
Really, though, I would probably expect FE4 remake. Drop my phone there. Really, I would probably expect an FE4 remake to sort of smooth over a lot of those differences by any means necessary, because this is kind of what you see. This is kind of what you see new Mystery of the Emblem and Echo, especially Echoes. Oh god, especially Echoes. They do this a lot.
Especially Echoes with certain important plot points.
Yeah, New Mystery did a lot. It was a
New Mystery actually makes the cast exist. It has real character development.
Yeah, but in terms of it does. It really does. But in terms of consistency, New Mystery kind of just takes a lot of the retcons more subtly to make everything work, like just removing male Pegasus Knights and just having female ones. Whereas Echoes kind of hits the inconsistencies with a major sledgehammer. Very different approaches, which is kind of the opposite of how their gameplay was approaching. Well, one of the most interesting inconsistencies on that note is definitely that Pegasi were supposed to be only female according to Thracia, but they were male and female in FE3. Okay, well, guess moving on from that tangent. When taken as a standalone story, I feel like Thracia's main cast is fine.
I think it has its own personality.
Yeah, the main issue with Thracia is kind of the same issue we run into with Shadow Dragon, which is the main cast really well written, and everyone else just basically doesn't exist. I think Thracia has the dubious honor of having the only characters in the entire series that have no dialogue aside from their death quotes, because Board and Court have dialogue in New Mystery. Like, there is a few characters in Thracia that literally have no dialogue in their death quotes.
Some people are just quiet. Can't blame them. I get you though. Yeah.
Leif for the most part. Leif, Nana.
Yeah, Thracia really didn't do itself any favors with character building of a lot of its units, and a lot of them that even do have dialogue are still kind of pointless.
Yeah, the main thing that Thracia kind of does is Leif, Avel, Merida. You know, the main couple of units, and Olwen and Sias to an extent. They kind of hard carry the story, but they do it well enough that it kind of evens out for me.
I can see it. You know, it doesn't have a very good balance of character development, and if it did, there's no guarantee you would necessarily make for a better story. But the story itself is carried fairly well by the people whose job it is to move the plot, and they do make enough of an impact on you as you're playing through it that it services on its own, even if it isn't as good as some of the other stories in other games.
Yeah, Leif in particular, I would favorably compare him to FE12 Marth. FE12 Marth is probably the most well-written lord up until we got Edelgard and Three Houses, and I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off by saying that, oh boy.
You're bringing up Edelgard right now in the middle of my Fire Emblem 5 discussion? Goodness.
Well, I mean, she is kind of based on Arvis, so there is actually a connection, even if we weren't talking about that, but...
She's literally the Flame Emperor.
I think that's literally the same epithet in Japanese as Arvis has.
So I think Arvis does it better.
Yeah, well...
I do like Edelgard, though. Don't crucify me here. I do like them both.
Yeah, Edelgard, very well written. But that's a soft spot for discussion for another video. The thing about up until Edelgard, I think FE12 Marth was the most well written lord, and I don't think the older fan translation really did Marth justice in terms of how his character progresses, because Shadow Dragon New Mystery has this sort of logical progression of his character development, and it's actually a really well written. Basically, New Mystery ends up being this massive test of faith storyline for Marths and his beliefs. And Chris, in and of himself, kind of exists to soap up all Marth's stupid moments from FE3, like, yo, well, who's Henry? That I just was shouting at the screen FE3. Marth, you should know who Henry is. You should know what he did. You should know what Henry's way is. Why are you doing this?
Okay, yeah, I think it's safe to say that FE12 Marth is one of the better lords in the franchise in terms of both writing and in terms of being a well-balanced character for his game. So that's definitely a big improvement FE12 has over 3.
So basically the point I'm making with that is Leif is actually very, very favorably comparable to this. Because it has this very nuanced storyline, actually, and it's pretty sure he's the only lord who explicitly deals with an inferiority complex. It's one of his main sort of character, I don't know what the term is. Basically, one of the main hurdles for his character is his sort of inferiority complex for not having the brand of Nyoran. Which is kind of interesting from a perspective of a lord, because most of the lords are, the big chosen one, like Marth is the descendant of Anri, Alm is the descendant of Duma via the brand. Selef is the scion of light with the brand of Naga and Baldur. Leif's whole storyline is kind of about how he isn't a chosen one, and this kind of gives him a lot of doubt at the start of his quest. And over the storyline, Leif's character development is sort of about realizing that even though he's not a quote-unquote chosen one, that doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because in the world of FE, pretty much anyone can have an impact.
You fight for your friends.
Yeah, pretty much anyone can have an impact. Three Houses kind of does this storyline, but I feel like FE5 does it really well too with Leif. I did enjoy FE5's story well enough when taken by itself.
That's a fair thing to say.
It's just the lack of focus on the extended cast kind of kneecaps it for me.
Without the same support systems as later games have, the older games are really hard pressed to fully flesh out their casts, and Thracia falls into that same trapping, I guess.
Yeah, the thing about FE4 is that it kind of has supports, and with the lovers conversations and the general conversations that you get. So it kind of has this janky proto-support system, which is why you get a lot of dialogue and characterization for the FE4 cast. And it's really the only pre-FE6 game to really do this, which is why the first 3 games remakes have such a heavily expanded story, because they didn't have the benefit of it. And I feel like a remake of Thracia would probably do the game a lot of good in that regard in terms of the character supports.
Dream.
Another thing is that I think Raedric is really fun as a central antagonist in the same way Lycain is.
Who?
Lycain, Raedric. Raedric is really fun as an antagonist in the same way that Lycain from Radiant Dawn is.
Oh, okay. Well, you got me there. No, Raedric.
He's not. Raedric isn't really meant to be a main threat, but he's kind of really satisfying in that regard, because he's enough of a... How do I put this politely? He's enough of a nonce to be actually enjoyable whenever he kind of has his mental breakdowns.
You can't forget
he's kind of like Lycain if Lycain... Oh, wait, what?
I'm just saying, if we're going to talk about good FE5 villains, you also can't forget that it has Kemph in it.
Oh, yes, Kemph. Kemph is kind of like Raedric in a microcosm, I guess. There's also that.
He's like small Raedric.
Yeah, they kind of had the same thing, except Kemph is a lot more of a dickhead.
Yes, but I don't know. I have nothing to add to that. Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Kemph actually reminds me of Narcian in the next game a lot.
I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's the biggest similarity there. Kemph and Narcian are basically the same person.
Narcian's a lot more crazy and just has an actual mental breakdown whenever he's confronted by Roy, while Kemph just kind of, if I remember correctly, Kemph just kind of is deluded by his own power right up until he gets stabbed to death.
Well, no one's perfect.
Okay, well, yeah, I think in terms of story, closing thoughts is really like it. I don't think it's
greatest.
I think
it does well for being something that is really, really poorly expanded on.
Yeah, that's the thing. it's a really good central story with pretty much no frills on it to kind of expand it. And I really think they could do a lot with this story in an Echoes remake, because we saw Gaiden had even less of a main story. I mean, they pretty much dropped Milla, and I remember this the other day. They pretty much dropped Milla after Act 3 in Gaiden. Even though she was like...
We've been going on for like 25 minutes already.
Oh, God.
I looked over and I saw Deku's profile picture just flash for a second. I'm like, uh-oh.
Oh, boy.
Ending thoughts. It doesn't have a ton to work with for its era. It was kind of limited in what it could do in its scope, but it tells a decent story, one that's pretty unique, especially from the struggle of the main character. And despite the fact it isn't backed up by fantastically well fleshed out supporting cast, it still is a decent story.
Like, if I had to rate the story by itself, I'd probably give it a B, maybe a B+, somewhere in the B rating.
Which is hilarious, because I know you hate the mechanics of it, too. So where's your rating coming from?
I'm just rating on the story itself.
Okay.
There's just the story itself, maybe like a B+ overall, maybe B, maybe B-. I don't know, somewhere in that general range. Thracia is really hard to rate for me.
Well, it is possibly the most unique Fire Emblem game to date. I think it is. There can be debates made for other ones, but I really think that Thracia is the oddball of the series.
See, the thing is,
until Echoes, but even then,
using this as a sort of segue, Thracia's in kind of the weird section where it is kind of unique, but I also feel that it kind of isn't at the same time. It's kind of
certainly will be tough to explain, but I look forward to hearing you try.
Yeah, try is the key word there.
I slightly harass you along the way.
Basically, FE5 is, believe it or not, responsible for most of the series convention up until Radiant Dawn.
For the next 4 games.
So basically, like, off the top of my head, Fog of War originated in Thracia.
Although you know what's funny? Thracia Fog of War makes sense, but I still hate it.
Yeah.
We should.
There's like thieves having to use lockpicks, which was a thing up until like Radiant Dawn. Then there's the stealing mechanic, which is kind of actually still a thing now.
Point out, Fire Emblem 8 thieves definitely can promote into rogues who don't need lockpicks. Your information is wrong.
But the thieves themselves picks, so it wasn't.
Right. Thieves can't.
Thieves themselves don't need lockpicks, so what I said was correct.
What you're saying is right. I'm just messing with you. So, yeah, we're kind of moving on to the mechanics portion, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to segue into that. FE5 is kind of a weird position because it has like 3 primary mechanics, I would want to say, that make it really different from other games. And the rest of the mechanics are kind of just a slightly more archaic variant of later Fire Emblem games, with some exceptions made for things movement stars.
Can I try and guess what the 3 mechanics are that are only appearing in Thracia?
They aren't really only appearing in Thracia, but they're kind of, for the most part, with the exception of dismounting, kind of only existing in Thracia in this.
Oh, I'm going to guess one of them is dismounting.
I wonder how you guess that.
Is it going to be talking about dismounting, fatigue, and capturing?
Yep.
I want to talk about those. Those are fun. Those are good topics. Although I know for a fact you're not as big a fan of dismounting as I am. At least not the way it's implemented here.
In the way it's implemented here, no. I'm fine. I would be fine if, like, in 3 houses, they did do forced dismounting with how it was, like, handled there, just because of how well it's implemented.
Let's save dismounting for last, though, because that'll be the real hot topic.
Okay. Fatigue, I guess, is the first thing we should work on. Technically, fatigue was brought back for Echoes, except there it had entirely function.
Yeah, I believe in Echoes, your ability to get fatigued only mattered when dungeon crawling, and each character had their own special resistance to it. I find it funny. I'm pretty sure Alm's resistance was like 0.45 and Celica's was 0.6, so she was way more resistant to fatigue than Alm was.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure Silk also had 0.6, which is proof that people who really like Silk and have Silk as a waifu have good tastes because she has the best fatigue resistance.
I mean, my wife is probably Doritza, so.
Yeah.
It's probably Doritza from Three Houses, but that's like still
Okay.
a thing.
Hmm.
I'm not entirely serious when I say this. I want to clarify the case it's used against me in the court of law later.
Serious, or you are not?
I am not entirely serious about that.
Okay, I was like, wait a minute. I mean, to each their own, but point is, fatigue exists in Thracia as a way of limiting the number of times you can deploy a unit. Basically, it makes sense that the way fatigue works is that the more a unit does things in a map, the more actions they take. A number that you can't see slowly builds up. Actually, no, you can see it, can't you?
I think you can, yeah.
You can see it actually in each person's menu. Well, a thing builds up that tells you how fatigued they are, and I think if it hits 50, then they cannot be deployed for the next map. And it makes sense because the more a unit does something, the more tired they'd be. That just makes sense, and that's something that really gets brushed over in most games. They just kind of ignore that, which is okay, I guess. But in Thracia, at least, as a mechanic, what it actually ends up doing is forcing you to train more than just one core team, which is nice because, well, it's not nice. It's annoying. I hate it as a thing. It really irritates me when I'm playing Thracia. But I know some people do love it.
See, at the end of the day, and this is kind of a hot take on this, I don't really think fatigue actually changes all that much at the end of the day. It changes it insofar as you have to make like 2 teams. And then you can kind of just switch between the two because I recall fatigue goes down whenever they aren't deployed for a map, right?
Fatigue resets whenever you don't deploy someone.
Yeah, so basically all you really have to do is make 2 teams.
Every map, actually.
Yeah, so basically all you have to do is make 2 teams and just kind of cycle between them to like pretty much dodge fatigue. This affects it insofar as...
It's like the worst case scenario, if you're really bad at managing your units and they get fatigued often and you don't want to use S drinks, then you will have to train up more units than you were planning on. But the game does give you a lot of options with that. And also there are ways of just going through maps without fatiguing all your units. It is possible. You just need to be diverse in how you tackle maps and plan a little bit. But worst case scenario, you have to train like an auxiliary team.
Yeah, my pro tip would be don't get into Fire Emblem unless you're good at managing units.
That's a real hot take there. Good job.
Okay, but really my actual hot take on this... Wait, I already said my hot take on this.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess we should
explain that was you already said the hot take. The hot take was that at worst you have to train up a second team. I don't think fatigue is bad in itself. It's just something that really sets aside Thracia for how different it is mechanically speaking. This doesn't appear anywhere else except for in Echoes. And in Echoes, it's really the yes drink is expensive and hard to get, but in Echoes you can just feed them an orange and cured.
What you can do in Echoes actually is if you offer I believe an alcoholic beverage to the Milla statue.
Yeah, you offer an alcoholic beverage to the Milla statue.
Yeah, if you offer
If
you offer an alcoholic beverage to the Milla statue as an offering, everyone's fatigue completely resets and so do your turn counts.
This is good because in the American version, alcohol is kind of useless.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only... No, it's not even the American version, just all versions.
I thought Japanese characters who were over 21 could consume the alcohol.
No, they were planning to do that, but they didn't implement it, I guess because of time constraints.
Oh, that doesn't affect me either way. I don't play the Japanese version. That's the one thing that really annoys me about that game. I'm not one for saying that mechanics are good or bad, or saying that I'm irritated by the way things are implemented. I'm annoyed that you can't consume the alcoholic beverages in Echoes. That makes me mad.
Yeah, the actual purpose of the alcoholic beverages is basically to be offered to Milla statues, so you don't have to offer anything else.
Yeah, what I do is I just sell it.
I guess that works too.
Well, I don't spend much time dungeon crawling, except for Act 6.
Well, this is actually kind of good that we're segueing to for a brief second, because Gaiden, FE5, and Echoes share a lot in common.
I have no idea where you're going with this. I'm excited.
Okay, basically, a lot of the not necessarily the mechanics, because FE5 plays out more like a traditional FE game compared to Guided Echoes, but a lot of the items in Thracia are items that only appear in it and Guided at the time, or like later in Echoes. How the rapier design in FE5, like the actual design of it, it got reused in Echoes, and that's like the only 2 times that rapier design has been used to my knowledge. The title logo of Fire Emblem Echoes is actually directly based on the title logo of FE5. And a lot of the Japanese names in FE5 for a lot of the characters and places and etc. are actually taken directly from Gaiden.
Okay.
So like Cerberus's Gate, for example, is actually Japanese name isn't the Japanese name for Cerberus, the mythological creature. It's the Japanese name for Cerberus from Gaiden, the boss in the end game with Duma.
The end game boss, a weird dude who appears. Yeah, I know him from Echoes.
Yeah. And then there's things like the Blessed Sword, which even though it works really mechanically differently in Thracia, I don't think a specific Blessed Sword has ever appeared outside of Thracia and Gaiden.
Maybe.
So basically, there's a lot of overlap between the games, and developers.
Sure Fire Emblem 8 had like a Shadow Killer sword that was never implemented.
Actually, it was implemented in Sacred Stones. Yeah, that's the word. It actually was implemented in Sacred Stones, but only in the Japanese version.
Oh yeah, that's the way it is. Well, my point being, it wasn't in America.
It actually technically is. It's just the event that was unlocking it was never released in America.
Essentially, it isn't the American one.
Like functionally,
okay. I do sometimes hack Fire Emblem 8 with FE Builder, so I do know it's there and I've used it before. But anyway, my point being that once again, FE8 just copied everything from Fire Emblem 2.
Yeah, basically, it did. FE8.
I like it. I still like it. Okay.
FE8 and FE5 took a lot from FE2.
Why they're both such good games, am I right?
Actually, even down to the Fire Emblem theme, I'm pretty sure Thracia and FE8, and this is something a lot of people don't know, I'm pretty sure they use the exact same arrangement of the title Fire Emblem theme, just with a different sound.
Huh. Impressive. I did not know that. Now I do. So,
and I'm pretty sure they're the only 2 games to use that specific arrangement of it.
What? Something that Fire Emblem 8 would have been a lot better with is the next mechanic we're going to talk about, capturing.
Yeah, capturing technically appears in Fates, but there also is a completely different mechanic, like with Fatigue and Echoes.
Mm-hmm. It's basically not the same thing.
Yeah, basically although recruiting certain enemies via capture is retained between them, but in Fates they're kind of weird about how they're implemented because they aren't really full units whenever you recruit them, but they are considered.
You got to capture Lifis in like Chapter 2X, 1X or whatever, 2X, whichever one it is. You got to capture Lifis in order to recruit him.
Yeah, in Thracia, instead of being able to capture recruitable non-generic bosses that aren't really units, in Thracia there's a lot of characters that are units and do count towards your ending that you do have to capture. And Lifis is one of them. I believe Olwen later on, and then there's Salem later. First Archmage in the series that was playable that way.
Yeah, so what capturing does is, I like the way you phrased it, it lets you forcibly rescue an enemy, kind of letting you carry them. And you and all adjacent allies are able to then trade with their inventory, essentially taking all their weapons and items, and then you can just release them. They do exit the map from that point. So capturing, it's a good way of resupplying your tools. In Fire Emblem 5, I know you're not presented with a very large amount of money. So a good way to restock your weapons is just by capturing generic enemy soldiers and then looting their healing items or their weapons.
See, yeah.
So because sometimes capturing, hold on, I want to mention my favorite thing about capturing in Fire Emblem 5 is how if you get a thief to completely disarm an enemy, you can just walk up and just, without having to fight them, you can just capture them and then release them the next turn and just force them out of the map without actually fighting them.
I'm pretty sure you can do that with bosses even, right? Certain bosses.
Makes sense. Like, it would make sense if you could.
Yeah. Anyways, this is all, yeah, I'm pretty sure you can do this with Reinhardt later, and that's how you get the second Dire Thunder.
Reinhardt and Dire Thunder. Yum.
Yeah, Olwen with Dire Thunder in this game. A lot of people like say, oh, I can't even remember his name. The other Mage Knight replacement for when she dies. There's a replacement for Olwen if she dies. A lot of people say, oh, he has higher base stats, so he has slightly higher base stats, so he's like definitely better than Olwen. But like, I'm sorry, Dire Thunder and the Blessed Sword are, in my opinion, very useful to have because they're brave weapons. Like, this is the only brave tome in the series up until like Awakening. And
that is my entire comments on that subject. Yes, impressive. Yeah, I think if you're going to be rocking a Brave Tome as a late game promoted unit, then you're probably fine.
Oh, she's not even a late game. She's like mid game.
She's not. You do get her more towards mid game.
Yeah, and not only does she get a PRF Brave Tome, then she gets a Brave Sword later. That is also effective against cavalry. Now, people do point out she's like gets the PRF Brave Sword like the last chapter that cavalry appears, so the cavalry killing effect isn't really all that useful, but it's still a brave weapon.
It's still a brave sword.
Yeah, it's still a brave sword, even if cavalry don't appear after that point.
Yeah. There are some things I know you very much don't like about capturing in Thracia, and why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, I was getting that. I like capturing as a concept, but the classic Kaga flavor, let's call it, that the first 5 games have starts to rear its ugly head, which is
I'd like to point out real fast that he worded that much more flavorfully in our notes.
So he classic Kaga stuff in there. Like another example would probably be you getting a bunch of axes in Fire Emblem Book 3, Book 2, bunch of really good axes, and then never recruiting any axe units in that entire game, just to screw with you. But yeah, this is kind of another thing where the mechanics just kind of unfairly screw with you, because capturing and doing this in concept is really nice, but a lot of the really good weapons, or the like unique weapons, or pretty much a lot of the enemy only weapons, are only enemy only because whenever you capture and steal them, they randomly turn into iron weapons in your inventory for like no reason at all.
Or mostly for worse, it's annoying that suddenly you'll capture an enemy with a unique weapon and you'll strip it of its weapon and you'll close your menu and drop it and you'll look at your new shiny axe and it is a new shiny axe, but it isn't the axe you stole from him. It's a different axe.
Yeah, this is one of those many cases in the first 5 games where I really don't get why they did this. Like,
I don't care. It doesn't bother me, but I can see how it's annoying.
Yeah, most of the enemy-only weapons in Thracia are only enemy-only, not because you can't obtain them, but because they randomly turn into something else when you get them. I think the only true enemy-only weapons are the Loptus Sword and Stone, because you can't capture those units, if I recall correctly. Because they're late-game bosses.
You're asking me, but...
Everything else, excluding the Shadow, because you technically get the Shadow Sword by it turning into a sword that you can get later. It's the same, identically the same sword functionally. It's just got a different name, and you get it later. But aside from that, I think this just baffles me to talk about. Like, why did they do this?
From a design perspective, I can't think of any advantage to it.
Like, there's someone that alleged that Kaga mentioned in an interview somewhere. I haven't been able to find this interview, so obviously compare yourself. Apparently, there is an interview floating around, according to some people, that Kaga is quoted as saying he designed FE5 to be as obtuse as possible to sell licensed guides.
That doesn't seem like something that he would say. I must say, I probably don't think that's real, but if it is real, then FE5 certainly backs that up.
Yeah, you can see a lot of shift in his design philosophy from like the FE3 days over to FE5, and I feel like this is partially because of his fatigue. And Mysteria Saga, I probably should save the really hot takes.
Yeah.
I should save the flaming hot takes. Yeah, I like capturing as a concept. It's just there's these weird little snafus in it that just kind of ruin it for me, or at least hurt it.
For me, I really do like it. I think that capturing is my favorite mechanic in Thracia. Well, my second favorite, other than movement stars. But I really appreciate that capturing. It is a way. It just goes to show you that the whole spirit of Fire Emblem 5 is different. In most Fire Emblem games, you and your army are generally fairly wealthy, and you have a lot of resources at your disposal, even if you aren't supposed to. You are just wealthy. In a lot of games, you can kind of do whatever with money. That is not the case at all in Fire Emblem 5. And if you want to restock your supplies, you literally have to rip it off your defeated enemies' bodies. That's actually the way you do it in Fire Emblem 5.
You know what's also weird about FE5 on that note is there's a secret shop system in FE5. And there's like a VIP card which you can use to get into all the secret shops. There's only one secret shop in the entire game. It's like they have an entire setup for secret, only one secret shop in the entire game. I never quite got that, but that's a thing.
I mean, there are some Fire Emblem games that only have 2 secret shops, right? I'm pretty sure that's like Fire Emblem 6 has only 2 secret shops, I have to say.
Yeah,
just the whole mechanics use only one is just kind of odd.
Yeah, I guess that covers it for this discussion. I like how it does flavor FE5 a little bit more to make the sort of desperate struggle that Leif has because he's not Seliph. Match up a lot better with the story.
Selif's army is rolling around with their legendary weapons and major holy blood, and Leif's over here with his brand, just like, hey guys, I'll be with you in a second, but let me steal a sword off this guy real fast.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of hammers this home, if we are to connect FE4 to 5, is that there's this entire saga in about mid to late game in FE5 where Leif has to defend Munster from an invasion after he finally reclaims it. Actually, no, I think it was Leonster. I think it was Leonster.
Well, Leonster's his.
I'm pretty sure it was Leonster now. Basically, he has to protect Leonster from like this 5-day siege or something from the Illialidur Empire. And basically it's like this series of maps that are this really intense onslaught with like these massive sprawling maps in the castle and like the surrounding area. And Seliph kind of comes in at the end to save him after this like long and arduous struggle. And in FE4, Leonster's like literally just one town.
Yeah, Leonster's like, well, I exist now, and I'm huge.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is that, like, in FE4, Seliph just kind of like, oh, this is just another town. And then FE5, Leif is like, help me, please.
Yeah. Should we talk about all the smaller mechanics real fast? Or should we go into the big one?
Yeah, let's do a speed round before we go to dismounting.
Okay, yeah. I want to do this real quick just because there's a few other ones. FE5 is kind of unique for having what a lot of games call Constitution. It actually calls Build. Build is a real stat. You can increase the level ups. It affects what thieves can and can't steal. Much better than in other games, by the way. It's really nice. I think it also determines whether or not you can capture an enemy. Your build level must be higher than theirs, or you must be on a horse, and they must not be on a horse, or they must be asleep. Something like that. I like Build. I think the way they implement it is kind of funny, just in that your thieves have the ability to level up Build when they promote. And so depending on how lucky you get, your thieves can just steal a lot of weapons off of enemies and completely negate them. Don't rely on this. It's bad tactics to rely on build levels and stealing that, but it's still something funny you can do.
Actually, I think that is Constitution, just straight up. It's just Japanese.
Well, it's called Build. Constitution's a little bit different. Just that Build doesn't.
The thing is,
Build doesn't affect
isn't
tome
Constitution in the Japanese games. It's Build.
Build doesn't affect tome weights.
I don't think I would ever say before I learned those games exist.
Deku's here to make sure we're on topic. Really? Okay, so okay. Oh, good. So it cut out all the non-essential stuff that he was talking about. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I can ramble sometimes. I try to keep everything tangential.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's build. Really similar to build, actually. There is movement. You can actually get movement increases. You can just legit increase your movement range on a level up. So you can get a unit who gets really blessed with their level ups, and they can just zoom around the map because they've gotten a few movement points that they otherwise wouldn't have had. That's kind of fun. So like your infantry people can run like horses.
Yeah, that actually is kind of interesting. This reminds me how Binding Blade, I think, is one of the only 2 games to have infinite boots. Just feed them all to Roy.
I forget, how do you get infinite boots in Binding Blade?
They're literally sold in a secret shop. That's how you get boots in Binding Blade.
It's a secret shop?
Yeah, and you can just buy as many.
That was a thing, but when I played FE6, I missed all the secret shops, and I was salty.
Yeah,
that's annoying.
Basically,
anyway,
Roy can be easily the most broken unit in Blade last job.
Alternatively, you can make a lot of people the most broken unit in the game by giving that.
Roy has the Binding Blade, so that kind of exalts him a bit above the others.
It's very true. The Binding Blade is quite the unit of a weapon. So I want to get back to movement level ups. Really similar to that. To movement is there's a mechanic called movement stars, which the more movement stars your character has, the higher the chance that they will gain a second action. What that means is when you attack or you press weight or you use an item, the game will roll a chance to see whether or not you get to act again. It's kind of like you've triggered Gale Force, sort of. It's essentially Gale Force, except actually it is basically Gale Force, right?
Wouldn't you say Gale Force? It's kind of Gale Force, but with a more chance-based way to activate it.
It's like Gale Force, but it's totally up to chance instead of assuredly you kill a unit, you act again. It's like Gale Force, except for you don't have to kill a unit. You just have to get lucky and have it land. So like relying on a mover is really bad tactically speaking because it's all down to chance. But they're fun because they can open up a lot of new tactics on the fly that you can plan for it to maybe happen but not rely on. I think they're a fun mechanic overall. Kind of in that same vein, there's something called Pursuit Critical Coefficient, which is essentially a number that everyone has a different value of that multiplies your second hit by, what is it? Like 10 or 20? Something like that, right?
I think
yeah, it full on multiplies your chance to crit by quite a bit. So you get a unit with really high critical coefficient rating. You can have certain counterattacks. Your second hit will always crit if you use certain units with weapons, just because Pursuit Critical Coefficient, it just multiplies your chance to crit or something like that. And that's fun because that means you get a lot of crits in Thracia.
And this is where my pedantism comes in, and I point out it's technically follow-up critical coefficient.
Say that, but everyone makes the acronym be PCC. So I'm gonna have to say you're technically right, and I see that, but people still call it Pursuit Critical because it's named
because they don't want it to be FUCC.
Because Pursuit is kind of the skill in the Juggernaut games that allows you to make up a second hit, even though that isn't the way it works.
It's actually follow-up, like that skill was localized.
Skill is localized?
Yeah,
so what you're telling me is when Arden gets the follow-up ring, he doesn't yell the power of Pursuit?
Nope. He does not.
Oh my goodness, that's like that was actually the only reason I played Fire Emblem 4. I'm not even lying. That was the only gosh. I feel so cheated now. Anyway, you get a chance to you get a lot more crits in Thracia, and it's kind of fun because of that. So you have the random chance to increase your constitution and leveling up your movement ability. You can randomly get Gale Force just by doing any action that ends your turn. You can also, like you said, there's pursuit critical, follow-up critical coefficient. And there's a lot of little things like that make it really unique and have its own system for just how basic turn-by-turn goes, leveling up, all that stuff. I would mention the Crusader Scrolls, but they aren't exactly unique in how they function. They work kind of like the shards do in Fire Emblem 3. But
And
they're
Echoes.
still... Oh, do they work? Oh, yeah, they do work like that in Echoes, you're right. I should know that. I'm the one who wrote that in our notes. Point being, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's a ton of fun mechanics that exist in the game. And overall, I think me and Jacob can agree, even though they aren't necessarily the things that impact the game the most, I think they do add some flavor to it, right?
Yeah, I kind of like them. I'm kind of wondering if Gale Force was them trying to bring back as something, because I imagine if they brought it back in a Thracia remake, it would be like a dedicated skill.
Maybe. I would hope everyone would have it though. But yeah, I agree. I like all those too. I think they're all fun. But there is one very hot topic that me and Jacob do not agree on.
Yeah.
And I think it's time.
Yeah, dismounting.
Dismounting. This is its own. This is a big thing here. So essentially, the basic of it, the basics of this, mechanically speaking, is when you are indoors in Fire Emblem 5, all mounted units, be it a flyer or a cavalry unit, they must dismount and become an infantry class. And this infantry class generally sucks because its weapon ranks are absolutely terrible. They all start off bad. You can grow them, but they're not good.
And here's where I have issue with it, is that they aren't just infantry, they're sword-locked infantry, even when this makes no sense.
Everyone wields a sword.
Well, okay. The exception is Mage Knight, who use swords and tomes.
Okay, Mage Knights are good. But Mage Knights are always good. Be fair, be real. Mage Knights are just a good class in general. Mm-hmm. Not even having to dismount can make them quite that bad. But even then, when you dismount, your units will have lower movement values even than the basic infantry units, and so that's kind of a shame. And also, you may think it isn't so bad they're sword locked, at least not if you're like a sword cavalier or something like that. It's just taking away movement. But no, the game actually has a separate category for mounted and dismounted weapon ranks. So even if you have A rank mounted swords, when you dismount, you'll still have E rank. And this isn't necessarily true. Not all characters, when they dismount, will have E rank swords. Some of them do have higher ranks, and that's great. But yeah, dismounting is kind of annoying in that regard, because your unit is carrying weapons specifically for their dedicated class option. Like if you have an axe knight, you're carrying axes. You're not ready for having to dismount and go into a castle and then randomly not be able to use your axes anymore. So if you don't know what's coming, then it can kind of catch you off guard and force you to lose some time. Unless you remember to fix it during the pre-chapter infantry sorting.
Yeah, this thing is, I'm fine with dismounting as a concept right up until the nonsense weapon rank system.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but I do think it's good. Like this is by the way where me and Jacob really disagree. He maintains that dismounting, forced dismounting is handled at its best here in Thracia, but that still isn't that good. And Jacob doesn't like it because your weapon ranks change in such stupid, unreasonable ways. And
the biggest thing is like the Axe Paladins is my go-to example is the Axe Paladins, because they're like trained from like whenever they started being a soldier in the use of axes. They're like
Squire days,
like expert users of axes. Like axes are historically known for being easier to use than swords, and for whatever reason, even though they're Axe Paladins and it's in their name and this expertise, They dismount and they suddenly decide, oh, I don't need axes anymore. I'm going to use swords, even though I had no idea how to use them.
Thank you, Kaga. Now, personally, I agree. Dismounting is really irritating, and it really cripples your mounted units. But to me, that isn't so bad because I think I place a lot of emphasis on how well dismounting really assists your overall unit balancing in Thracia. See, in most Fire Emblem games, if you had to choose between having X stats and
Hey guys, Chase here. So, I'm recording this during post because the recording that I had of Jacob and Ilya from this point on, for some reason, did not record. We didn't figure this out until after the recording was over. So, yeah, that was nice. We talked about it and decided instead of having them re-record it, I was just going to show up and tell you guys I messed up. Anyways, just to cut things short, they gave the game a B, in general, in total. You can see it on the screen now. So, I guess this is the point where I thank you guys for watching. Like, sub, comment, all that stuff that I never remember to actually tell you guys to do in these videos. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.